Have you ever wondered why Iran is one of the most talked about countries in the world? Why can every step of this country affect global political processes? Why is the whole world afraid of Iran, and how could it become such a powerful player on the world stage, despite international sanctions and threats? In this video, you will learn the answers to these questions and wonder how this great country went from ancient Persia to a modern superpower. But this is not just a story about politics and history. We will reveal to you the secrets that Iran hides, as well as show how it was able to defeat the United States and Israel in the field of hybrid warfare. And if you think that everything is already known about the geopolitics of Iran, you are mistaken. This material will change your perception of this region forever. We will have an incredible journey into the depths of Iran's history, culture, and politics. Today you will understand that Iran can defeat America and Israel, and why the whole world is against it. So let's start from the beginning, with how Iran became what it is today. The ancient roots of Iran, from the Aryans to the first empires. To understand how Iran became so powerful and invincible, you need to go back to its roots, to the most ancient times. We will fast forward several millennia ago, when Indo-Europeans, the ancestors of modern Iranians, first settled on the Iranian plateau. Our travels will begin in the distant 2nd millennium BC, when the first civilizations began to form in the territory that we now call Iran. These lands were the most important trade routes between East and West. But what is remarkable is that they have also become the cradle of a unique culture that will develop over thousands of years and have a huge impact on the world. So, who were these first settlers? These were Indo-Europeans, tribes speaking a language related to Latin, Greek, and even Portuguese. Since they entered these lands, the formation of a unique culture began, which in the future would give rise to Persia, a powerful empire that left an indelible mark on world history. The first major kingdoms that emerged in Iran were the Median and Persian. The Media settled in the northwest of the country, and they quickly became a powerful force, seizing territories around and creating a stable state structure. However, the real glory came with the Persians. The Persian Empire began its history with the creation of the kingdom known as Elam, which flourished in southwestern Iran. But while Elam was an important player, it was the Persians who would change the course of world history in the future. The emergence of the Persian Empire. It all started with one of the greatest rulers in history, Cyrus the Great. When he became king, Persia was just one of the many small kingdoms in the region. However, Cyrus' ambitions led him to unite these kingdoms into one great state. He was not an ordinary conqueror. He was a revolutionary who came up with a new way of governing. Instead of destroying conquered peoples, he recognized their culture and religion, thereby winning the hearts of people, not just the land. Cyrus the Great became a symbol of a new approach to empire, and not through violence, but through respect. He allowed the Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple, which, in turn, secured him the status not only as a conqueror, but also as a liberator. Cyrus' wise and far-sighted actions helped Persia create an empire that stretched from India to Egypt, from the Mediterranean Sea to Central Asia. The development of the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire reached its peak under King Darius the Great, who continued the work of Cyrus. He expanded the territory of Persia, created a system of roads and mail that could quickly transmit information across the empire, and ensured financial stability with a single currency. It was under Darius that Persia became a symbol of strength, order, and prosperity. The management system followed by the Persians was extremely effective. Instead of trying to completely subjugate and assimilate the conquered peoples, Persia allowed the regions to maintain their laws and customs, which ensured the long-term loyalty of the conquered peoples. They recognized the supremacy of the Persian king, but they did not lose their uniqueness. It was a wise decision that brought stability to Persia for centuries. Persia, the first world superpower. The Persian Empire was the world's first superpower. It was a state that not only ruled a vast territory, but also integrated different peoples and cultures into one whole. Unlike empires that were built on violence and slavery, Persia created a system in which local peoples could maintain their identity while becoming part of a powerful and prosperous empire. Having reached such heights, Persia seemed invincible. But there are often unexpected twists in history. And now, the moment has come when the world's first superpower is facing a new challenge that will lead to its downfall. But before that happened, Persia left a deep mark on history, and its ideas, culture, and wisdom will live on long after its fall. The Persian Empire. Its greatness and fall. The Persian Empire may have been the first great world power, but nothing lasts forever. All endeavors, even the most magnificent ones, sooner or later face obstacles that can change their fate. And in the case of Persia, this turn was due to an external enemy who turned out to be ready to fight a powerful empire. In this section, we will talk about how Persia flourished, but at some point faced one of the most determined and ambitious conquerors of antiquity, Alexander the Great. The greatness of the Persian Empire. Before meeting Alexander, Persia was at the height of its power. Science, art, and architecture flourished within the empire, while the economy and trade enjoyed a golden age. The main political and economic success of Persia lay in its ability to manage a vast territory, uniting peoples with different cultures and religions. Under King Darius the Great, Persia became incredibly strong and organized. Darius was not only an outstanding military leader, but also a reformer. He created a system of 6 provinces, each of which was ruled by local kings, but under the control of the central government. This made it possible to effectively manage a vast territory, from India to Egypt, from the Caucasus to the Persian Gulf. Darius also built the famous Persian Royal Road, which connected the farthest corners of the empire and allowed the movement of troops, merchants, and communications in a matter of weeks. It was a true superpower of its time, and it was under Darius that Persia became the largest empire on the planet. But the moment came when all this greatness was under threat. And not from internal corruption or uprisings, but from an external threat that Persia could not cope with. The great conqueror is Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great, the young and ambitious ruler of Macedonia, began his conquest of the East in 334 BC. He was the heir to his father, King Philip I, and sought not only to expand his territories, but also to leave behind a legend. When he began his campaign against Persia, his army was not that large in numbers, but its discipline and strategy were outstanding. The Persians underestimated their enemy. Under the leadership of Darius I, the Persian Empire sent huge armies to the west, but failed to gain a decisive victory in a series of battles. After several major defeats, including the famous Battle of the Granicus and Issus, the Persian forces began to disintegrate. A desperate threat has appeared to the very center of the empire. The main and final blow was the Battle of Gavgamela in 331 BC. In this decisive battle, Alexander the Great defeated the army of Darius I, and this was effectively the end of the Persian Empire as a single political force. Darius I was killed by his own men, and Persia, despite all its greatness, collapsed under the blows of the Greeks. Alexander the Great and his relations with Persia. Despite his victorious conquest, Alexander the Great did not destroy Persia. On the contrary, he absorbed her culture and ideals. Alexander was surprised by the wisdom and organization of Persian rule. He adopted many elements of the Persian bureaucracy, respected Persian religions and traditions, and even married several Persian princesses. For Alexander, Persia became not just an enemy, but also a source of inspiration. His actions, which seemed treacherous to his Greek soldiers, caused discontent among his army, but these steps in themselves show how much Alexander liked the Persian culture and management system. An equally important point was how Alexander took the title King of Kings, which was used by the Persian rulers. He not only accepted this title, but also aspired to become a worthy heir to the Persian Empire. This led to the fact that after the victory, he restored the Persian system of government, continued to use the Persian army, and eventually became a symbol of the unification of East and West. The fall of Persia. The irony of history. Persia, despite its power and greatness, could not escape the fall. The great conquest of Alexander the Great not only destroyed the Persian Empire, but also changed the course of world history. Although Persia did not completely disappear, its culture and ideas continued to live on, it no longer remained the dominant player in international politics. When Alexander died in 323 BC, his empire collapsed, and many parts of former Persia were lost. However, one important legacy has remained in history: the idea of a great empire based on tolerance, respect for cultures and religions, as well as the principles of effective governance. This legacy will live on in future generations and rulers, and it will later serve as the basis for the restoration of the great Persian identity. Persia was not completely destroyed, but its fall was a turning point that opened the way for new dynasties and cultural changes. Islam and its influence on Iran. From the Sassanids to the Arab conquest. After the fall of the great Persian Empire and the destruction of the Sasanian dynasty in the 7th century AD, Iran found itself at a crossroads. For almost 1,000 years, Persian culture, Zoroastrianism, and politics have been an integral part of the region. However, with the arrival of the Arabs and the spread of Islam, a new era began, which radically changed not only the religious picture, but also the political, cultural, and social life of Iran. The Sasanian Empire, the last great Persian power. The Sassanids, the dynasty that replaced the Parthians in the 3rd century AD, were the last vivid expression of Persian power before the Arab conquest. It was an empire in which Zoroastrianism was the state religion, and Persia regained the status of a great power competing with the Roman later Byzantine Empire. Under the Sassanids, Iran became the center of the most important philosophical and scientific schools, and culture reached new heights. The empire possessed modern technologies in the fields of architecture, medicine, as well as scientific achievements in mathematics and astronomy. She was a powerful opponent for Byzantium, and the struggle for influence in the region was one of the most important in the world history of that time. However, despite all their achievements, the Sasanians could not resist the new threat. In the 7th century, a new player appeared on the horizon of the Arabs. The Arab conquest, the beginning of a new era. In 633 AD, Arab Muslim armies launched their offensive against the Sasanian Empire. It was not just a conquest, it was a shift in the entire religious and cultural paradigm that changed Iran forever. After several major battles, such as the Battle of Qadisiyah 636, the Arabs inflicted a decisive defeat on the Sasanian forces, which led to the final fall of the empire. The conquest was rapid, and within a few decades the Arabs had gained a foothold in what is now Iran. The cultural and religious revolution that the Arab conquerors brought with them was colossal. First of all, Islam, which was preached by the Arabs, became the new state religion, displacing Zoroastrianism, which had been an integral part of the Persian identity for several millennia. Islamization of Iran. Social and cultural changes. With the adoption of Islam, Iran has undergone tremendous changes. Initially, the Arab rulers did not try to completely destroy the Persian culture, but at the same time intensified the Arabization of the region. It was a time when the Persian elite gradually began to switch to Arabic, and Arabic culture had an increasing influence on local life. But despite this, Iran has not lost its cultural identity. The Persian people continue to preserve their culture, literature, and art. One of the most striking examples of this is the rise of Persian poetry and philosophy within the Islamic world. Iran has become one of the centers of Islamic civilization, preserving the strong elements of its ancient culture. The role of Iran in the spread of Shiite Islam. Although Islam came to Iran in the form of Sunni Islam, over time, Shiite Islam became the dominant trend. This happened due to several historical events and political processes that took place in the region in the following centuries. Shiite Islam gained significant influence in Iran during the dynasties such as the Buyids 10th century and Safavids 16th century. Shiite Islam has become not only a religion, but also an important element of Iran's national identity, separating it from the rest of the Arab world and other Muslim countries. During the Safavid era, Shiism was officially declared the state religion, and Iran became the center of Shiite culture, Persian culture, and Islam. The merging of two worlds. Iranians, having converted to Islam, did not abandon their ancient culture. On the contrary, they began to merge elements of Islam with Persian traditions. Persian literature, art, music, and architecture received a new impetus due to the influence of Islam, creating a unique cultural heritage that became one of the foundations of the Islamic Golden Age. With the merging of the two worlds of Persian and Islamic, such outstanding phenomena as Islamic philosophy, poetry, and architecture emerged. Iran has become an important center of science and culture, spreading knowledge throughout the Islamic world. It was a time when Persian culture and Islam combined, creating a unique civilization that continued to be an important player on the world stage. Thus, although the Arab conquest brought Islam to Iran, it did not destroy Persian culture. Iran, on the contrary, has become an important center for the development of Islamic civilization, preserving its traditions and bringing its own cultural achievements to the Islamic world. In this process, Iran has not only survived external threats, but has also become an essential part of a global cultural and religious network that has influenced the development of the entire Middle East and Central Asia. Modern Iran. From the Pahlavi dynasty to the Islamic Revolution. Fast forward to the 20th century, when Iran, one of the most ancient civilizations in the world, faced powerful external and internal challenges that led to drastic changes. In this section, we will see how Iran went through modernization, attempts at Western integration, and a revolution that radically changed the country and its place in the world. Reza Pahlavi. Modernization and Western influence. At the beginning of the 20th century, Iran was in a difficult political situation. After years of rule by weak dynasties, Iran found itself under the control of Britain and Russia, who shared influence in the country and used its resources for their own interests. At this time, Reza Pahlavi ascended the throne, who became the Shah in 1925, establishing the Pahlavi dynasty. Reza Pahlavi was a determined and ambitious leader who understood that Iran needed to radically change its economy and society in order to become a modern state capable of competing with global superpowers. He began a modernization policy inspired by Western countries, especially Germany and the United Kingdom. Reza sought to get rid of the influence of foreign powers, but at the same time he aimed at rapid transformation in Iran. One of the most notable steps in modernization was the process of industrialization. The Shah initiated the construction of large infrastructure facilities, roads, railways, factories. He also initiated reforms in the fields of education, healthcare, and women's rights. However, these reforms were often perceived as externally imposed, and many Iranians felt that Reza Pahlavi was cooperating too closely with the West, especially with the United States and Britain. Renaming Persia to Iran. Symbolic changes. In 1935, Reza Pahlavi made an important decision that became a symbol of his efforts to modernize the country and abandon old traditions. He sent a diplomatic letter to all the world's embassies, in which he asked that his country now be called Iran instead of Persia. It was not just a name change, it was a step symbolizing the abandonment of the colonial legacy and the pursuit of a new national identity. Iran, which means land of the Aryans in Persian, has now become the official name of the country. This decision was not unanimously accepted by the people. For many Iranians, the name Persia was associated with the greatness and glory of ancient empires, such as the Achaemenids and Sassanids. The name change was perceived as a loss of historical identity, and many felt that their culture and history had been betrayed for the sake of a political image. Political and social problems. Despite the successes in modernization, Reza Pahlavi's rule faced many challenges. Firstly, many reformist measures caused discontent among the broad masses, especially among peasants and workers who did not feel real changes in their lives. Despite the creation of infrastructure and education, most of the population remained poor, and the new elite, a small group of aristocrats and businessmen with little connection to the people who enjoyed great privileges. Secondly, Reza Pahlavi's policy of westernization of the country and his friendship with the United States have created a huge gap between the government and traditional forces in Iran, including religious circles. Many Shiite spiritual leaders perceived Western values, such as secularism and capitalism, as a threat to Iran's Islamic spirit. Reza's unpopularity among religious and conservative strata and the increasing protests in the 1940s began to gain momentum. However, his reign continued until he was forced to leave the throne in 1941, after Britain and the USSR seized Iran, and Reza was forced to abdicate in favor of his son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Attempts at reform and brutal repression. After Mohammad Reza Pahlavi became the Shah in 1941, he continued his father's policies, but now with greater dependence on the United States and the West. In the 1950s, the Shah managed to return to power after a short-term coup that removed him from the throne. U.S. support strengthened his position, and the Shah initiated a series of reforms aimed at modernizing Iran. But despite the initial successes, Mohammad Reza's rule soon began to be consumed by internal contradictions. He tried to please the Western powers, while his attempts to carry out economic and social reforms were often met with strong resistance. He led the White Revolution in 1963, an ambitious plan to modernize agriculture, strengthen the economy, and empower women. These reforms have caused discontent among both traditional forces and the liberal opposition. In addition, the Shah became known for his repression of any opposition. The creation of the Soviet security forces, which brutally suppressed protests and dissent, only worsened the situation. As a result, in the 1970s, Iran faced unrest, discontent, and increasing pressure from religious and political movements. The Islamic Revolution. The role of Ayatollah Khomeini. In 1979, after decades of tension, Iran was engulfed by the Islamic Revolution. It was the culminating moment when opposition forces, from Marxists to Islamic radicals, joined together to overthrow the Shah. The leader of the revolution was Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who was one of the strongest critics of the Shah and his Western policies. The revolution led to the overthrow of the Pahlavi dynasty and the establishment of the Islamic Republic of Iran with Khomeini as supreme leader. It was not just a political event, but also a religious and cultural change, when Shiite Islam became the official ideology of the country. Iran was no longer just a secular state seeking modernization, it became a theocratic regime that imposed strict religious norms on its citizens. The revolution has changed Iran forever, setting it on a path that will be filled with internal conflicts, external sanctions, and international isolation. Iran was no longer a friend of the West, and from that moment on, a new era began in relations with world powers, especially the United States. Why is Iran invincible? Iran is a country with a long history, great influence, and strategic importance. Despite decades of international isolation, sanctions, military threats, and political crises, Iran continues to stand firm on the world stage, and it seems impossible to defeat it. Why is this so? What makes this country so invincible? In this section, we will look at the key factors that help Iran survive and sometimes succeed in the face of constant pressure from global politics. Geography. Natural fortifications of Iran. Iran is a country that is geographically protected from external threats. The diversity of natural landscapes, such as mountains, deserts, and vast plateaus, gives Iran strategic advantages. The most significant of these natural barriers are the Zagros Mountains, which stretch along the western border of the country. These mountains create natural barriers that make it difficult for armies to advance, and historically have been what saved Iran from many conquerors. The Caspian Sea stretches to the north of Iran, and the Persian Gulf to the south, which also creates natural barriers and serves as an important element in the country's defensive strategy. These natural fortifications allowed Iran to maintain its independence for a long time, even when external threats became particularly acute. Unity of the people and ideology. Iran also has a unique social and political cohesion. Shiite Islam, which became the basis of the Islamic Republic's ideology, has become not only a religious foundation, but also a key element in maintaining internal unity. This ideology creates a strong sense of national identity and belonging to a common cause, which has deep roots in the culture and history of the country. Shiism in Iran has a special emphasis on resisting external oppression and fighting for justice. This creates an ideology of resilience and willingness to resist any external pressures. It was these values that played a key role in the 1979 Iranian Islamic Revolution, and they still support the unity of the people in conditions of international isolation. An equally important factor is the role of religious leaders such as the Ayatollahs, who have become not only spiritual but also political figures. Ensuring that the country's political course is maintained in accordance with religious canons and values. This strengthens internal stability and gives the government strong control over the situation inside the country. Iran's military might. One of the factors that makes Iran invincible is its ability to develop and produce modern types of weapons, including missiles and technologies for the production of weapons of mass destruction. Iran is actively investing in its defense industry and developing its own technologies, which allows it to reduce its dependence on foreign arms supplies. Iran's missile arsenal has become an essential part of its strategic power. It uses medium and long-range missiles that can hit targets at a considerable distance. These missiles can be equipped with various types of warheads, including chemical and nuclear ones, which adds a significant element of deterrence to the country's military strategy. It is also worth noting the power and experience of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC). This elite military unit not only protects Iran's state system, but is also actively involved in supporting allies such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and Shiite groups in Iraq. The IRGC not only controls the armed forces, but also has a significant impact on the country's economy and politics, political strategy, and flexibility in international politics. Iran has always been distinguished by its ability to maneuver in international relations, despite pressure and sanctions. The country's foreign policy is based on the principles of autonomy and opposition to external interference, which allows it to maintain its independence and influence the most important events in the Middle East. Iran actively supports alliances with other countries that share its views on foreign policy, including Russia, China, and some Arab countries. This alliance with powerful countries helps Iran protect its interests and resist attempts by Western countries to isolate it. Friendly relations with such powers create a strategic buffer against external pressure and allow Iran to maintain its independence on the world stage. Iran's economic stability. The sanctions imposed on Iran since the early 1980s have not been a fatal blow to the country's economy. On the contrary, Iran has learned to adapt to these sanctions by developing its domestic industry and finding new markets. The country has significantly diversified its exports and learned how to circumvent international restrictions by using sophisticated schemes to sell oil and other resources. Although Iran's economy is suffering from sanctions, the government uses nationalist rhetoric and ideological orientation to mobilize the population to survive in isolation. Cohesion against the background of economic difficulties also strengthens national identity and maintains internal stability. Why is Iran not only surviving, but also winning? Iran has not only been able to survive under constant pressure and external threats, but also continues to increase its influence in the region and in the world. This is largely due to its strategic location, military might, internal political stability, and ideological commitment to resilience and resistance to external interference. Today, Iran is not just a country facing global sanctions, it is a key player in the Middle East, whose influence extends to neighboring countries and international events. He is not afraid to confront the United States and Israel, but on the contrary, uses his geopolitical and military advantages to shape his strategy on the world stage. This is not only the result of military might, but also strategic flexibility, cultural resilience, and a unique ability to adapt to changing conditions. Iran has proved that despite international pressure, it is capable not only of surviving, but also of becoming stronger. Iran is in conflict with the United States and Israel. Over the past decades, Iran has been one of the most striking and unpredictable players on the world stage, especially in relations with two countries that, ideally, would have to become its allies, the United States and Israel. Relations with them over the past 40 years have been extremely tense and full of confrontations, with far-reaching consequences not only for the region, but for the whole world. In this section, we will examine how Iran found itself in this position and why its conflicts with these countries have become key elements in global geopolitics. Iran and the USA, from allies to enemies. Before the 1979 Islamic Revolution, relations between Iran and the United States were quite strong. The Shah of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, was one of the United States' strongest allies in the Middle East. Iran was an important source of oil for the American economy and also played a key role in ensuring stability in the region, protecting Western interests, and curbing Soviet influence in the Persian Gulf. During this period, the United States actively supported Iran by providing it with modern military technologies, helping it modernize its economy and security. However, the 1979 Islamic Revolution, during which the Shah was overthrown and power in the country passed to Ayatollah Khomeini and Shiite spiritual leaders, put an end to this alliance. Shah Reza Pahlavi was removed from power, and Iran became an Islamic Republic that officially rejected Western influence and established a harsh policy against the United States and its allies. The conflict with the United States escalated after the seizure of the American embassy in Tehran in 1979, when 52 diplomats were taken hostage. This incident became a symbol of Iran's new hostile course towards the West, and since then relations between the two countries have only deteriorated. After the revolution, the United States imposed large-scale sanctions on Iran aimed at isolating the country and weakening its influence on the world stage. Over the next decades, the United States accused Iran of supporting terrorist organizations such as Hezbollah and Hamas, actively interfering in the affairs of neighboring countries and developing nuclear weapons. Washington sees Iran as a threat to stability in the region and global security. Sanctions, military threats, and diplomatic pressure have become the main tools of American policy toward Iran. Iran and Israel. The confrontation from the very beginning. Relations between Iran and Israel also changed dramatically after the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Up to this point, Iran was one of the few Arab, more precisely, Persian states that supported Israel. The Shah of Iran considered Israel a strategic ally in the Middle East and even supplied it with oil. However, after Khomeini came to power, Iran became a fierce opponent of Israel. In 1979, shortly after the revolution, Iran severed all diplomatic relations with Israel and began to support the Palestinian issue as an important element of its foreign policy. Khomeini declared that Israel is an unrighteous state and began actively supporting Arab countries and Palestinians in their struggle against Israel. This anti-Israeli course has become the basis of Iran's foreign policy and continues to be one of the most important elements of its national identity and ideology. Iran actively supports Shiite armed groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, which oppose Israel, as well as Palestinian groups, including Hamas, which are fighting the Israeli occupation. In addition, Iran plays an important role in supporting Syria, which is also Israel's main opponent. For Israel, Iran has become one of the most serious threats in the region. Iran's nuclear program, support for terrorist groups, and its strategic influence in neighboring countries Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon have made Iran a key target of Israeli foreign policy. In response, Israel is actively modernizing its military, including missile defense and nuclear arsenal, and has repeatedly stated its readiness to take measures to stop Iran if it continues to develop its nuclear program. The nuclear threat and international sanctions. Iran's nuclear program has become a key element of the tense relations between Iran, the United States, and Israel. Since the early 2000s, it has become clear that Iran is actively developing its nuclear program, which has caused concern not only among the United States and Israel, but also among other world powers. Despite Iran's statements about the peaceful purposes of its program, the United States and Israel view it as a potential threat that could allow Iran to develop nuclear weapons and become a threat to the region and, in particular, to Israel. In response, the United States and its allies imposed harsh economic sanctions on Iran, which were supposed to force the country to end its nuclear program. In 2015, the JCPOA was signed, under which Iran agreed to limit its nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of sanctions. However, in 2018, the United States withdrew from the agreement, which led to a new escalating cycle of sanctions and tensions. Israel, in turn, has repeatedly stated its readiness to take military action against Iran in order to prevent the creation of Iranian nuclear weapons. Israel's military threats and maneuvers around the Iranian nuclear program continue to this day, which creates a constant threat of military conflict in the region. Geopolitics and support for regional allies. Iran is not limited only to the conflict with the United States and Israel. He actively supports allies in the region, which makes him a strategic player in the Middle East. Iran provides assistance to the government of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, supports Shiite groups in Iraq and Lebanon, and also exerts influence on various Palestinian groups. These actions support his position in the region and provide influence on key countries such as Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. For their part, Israel and the United States are trying to contain Iran's influence by supporting their allies in the region, including the Arab countries of the Persian Gulf. Strategic alliances such as joint military exercises and arms shipments have become important tools in countering Iran. Conclusion: endless conflict or the search for ways to peaceful coexistence. Iran's conflict with the United States and Israel is not just a confrontation between the two countries, but also a reflection of a deeper geopolitical struggle for influence in the Middle East region. This conflict has religious, political, economic, and strategic roots, and there are no signs of an early resolution. Nevertheless, Iran continues to maintain its independence and strategic influence, using both military and diplomatic levers. This conflict is likely to continue, but at some point the international community will have to find ways to peacefully resolve this endless confrontation that has been shaping the fate of the region's countries for too long. How Iran defeats America and Israel. Iran, despite all external threats, not only survives in conditions of international isolation, but also in some aspects emerges victorious in the conflict with the world superpowers, the United States and Israel. This does not mean that Iran has a clear military superiority, but in the field of hybrid warfare, strategic maneuvering and the use of political and ideological levers, Iran is succeeding. In this section, we will look at how Iran, despite its isolation, was able to become such a powerful player in international politics and how it is able to defeat America and Israel. Hybrid warfare strategy. One of the main reasons why Iran remains invincible is its ability to effectively use hybrid warfare. These are not direct military clashes, but a struggle through proxy groups, information, cyber attacks, and political influence. Iran has become a master of hybrid warfare, actively using allies and supporters to weaken its enemies without engaging in open hostilities with them. Iran supports armed groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Palestine, as well as Shiite groups in Iraq and Yemen. These organizations, acting on behalf of Iran, oppose Israel and the United States, striking at their interests, but at the same time remaining aloof from direct military conflict. The war through proxy groups allows Iran to contain pressure from the United States and Israel without entering into full-fledged wars. These groups are a kind of tools of Iran that use military force to advance its interests in the region. Thus, Iran is dealing psychological and strategic blows to its enemies without losing its own army in the fight. Information and propaganda warfare. Iran actively uses information technology and propaganda to manipulate public opinion, both domestically and internationally. Iranian media, such as press TV and other state-owned channels, play a key role in spreading the official version of events, shaping Iran's perception as a hero who fights for justice, resisting the West and its aggression. Iran also actively uses social media and the internet to promote its views, spread propaganda, and influence events in countries where there are significant Iranian diasporas or political forces supporting the Islamic Revolution. In this, Iran shows that information and propaganda strategies can be just as effective as military ones. Geopolitical maneuvering. Iran skillfully maneuvers in international politics using its geopolitical advantages. For decades, he has maintained close relations with countries such as Russia, China, and Syria. These countries, in turn, support Iran in response to Western pressure. Russia, for example, has a strategic interest in Syria, where it maintains its military base, and Iran provides it with support in exchange for alliance. China, in turn, is interested in Iranian oil and other natural resources, which makes their relationship mutually beneficial. Thus, Iran was able to build international alliances with key powers, which allowed it to resist the sanctions and isolation imposed by the West. These relations with world powers give Iran the opportunity to pursue its own policy and, to a certain extent, ensure its security. Economic sustainability and the use of sanctions. Despite harsh economic sanctions from the United States and other Western countries, Iran has not only survived, but also learned to benefit from these sanctions. The sanctions have played a role in stimulating domestic industry and the business sector, which has allowed the country to reduce its dependence on external supplies and investments. In addition, Iran is actively using its ties with neighboring countries and alliances to circumvent sanctions. For example, Iran has become an important trading partner for countries such as Turkey, Iraq, and China, which help it circumvent Western financial restrictions. Iran also actively uses illegal trade channels, including oil transportation through hidden routes and other methods to support the economy. The development of the nuclear program as a form of deterrence. Iran's nuclear program has become one of the most important factors in its invincibility. Despite international pressure and threats, Iran continues to develop its nuclear technology, claiming that it is aimed solely at peaceful purposes. However, for the United States and Israel, this looks like a threat, as Iran may gain the ability to create nuclear weapons. Iran, knowing that it will not be able to completely win in a direct military conflict with countries such as the United States or Israel, uses its nuclear program as a deterrent. In the event of a threat from the West, Iran could resort to its nuclear arsenal, or at least build up defenses powerful enough to demonstrate its ability to strike at its enemies. This works as a psychological weapon, forcing the United States and Israel to be careful in their actions. Confrontation with Israel. An endless threat. Israel considers Iran as the main threat to its existence in the Middle East. However, Iran, despite all attempts at isolation and pressure, continues to maintain its influence in the region and supports Israel's opponents. It is this confrontation that is the main driving force of conflicts in the region. Iran not only supports armed groups opposed to Israel, such as Hezbollah and Hamas, but also actively develops missiles and other weapons that could threaten Israel's security. Israel, in turn, is actively modernizing its army and missile systems to respond to the threat posed by Iran. Nevertheless, Iran understands that a direct military clash with Israel would be devastating for both sides and prefers to conduct this struggle on a more secretive level, using proxy groups and other means. Iran, despite its limitations and external threats, continues to maintain its independence and strength due to its unique strategy involving hybrid warfare, information influence, strategic alliances, and a strong economic and military base. Iran has learned to maneuver effectively in the face of sanctions and political isolation, turning every challenge into an opportunity to strengthen its power. Therefore, despite external pressure and threats, Iran remains an invincible player on the world stage. Conclusion: Iran is a country that has gone through centuries of historical changes, external threats, and internal transformations. From its ancient roots in Persian culture to its transformation into a powerful theocratic power, Iran has always maintained its unique identity and influence in the world. But at the same time, He was facing unprecedented challenges, from seizures and Arab conquest to external isolation and economic sanctions. Iran has demonstrated its ability to adapt to conditions that would seem deadly to most countries. The question we asked at the beginning is, why is Iran invincible? Has multiple response levels. This is not just a matter of military might or political stability. It's a matter of cultural identity, strategic flexibility, and determination to survive under global pressure. Iran has been able to prove that its strength lies not only in its military or politics, but also in its ability to maneuver in a world full of contradictions and conflicts. Whether it's using proxy groups in wars in the Middle East, developing a nuclear program, or building powerful alliances with countries like Russia and China, Iran is not just surviving, it is playing on the world stage. Not inferior to even more powerful players. Today, Iran remains one of the most controversial and influential players in the Middle East. Its strategic location, influence on its neighbors, and ability to withstand sanctions and military threats make it a unique and powerful player. However, he still faces many challenges. How will Iran develop in the future in the face of global changes? What threats and opportunities will the next decade bring to the Islamic Republic? The answers to these questions will determine Iran's future and its role in global politics. No matter what challenges lie ahead for the country, one thing is for sure. Iran, despite all its difficulties and internal contradictions, will continue to be a powerful and decisive player in world politics that the world has to reckon with. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you were interested, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment so that we can continue to explore exciting stories and global events. See you soon.